Leading at Work, Reimagining Leadership and Coaching for Results. Brought to you by the International Coaching Federation. Only exceptional leadership will determine our future in these unprecedented times. The news is filled with the devastating and brutal war in Ukraine. While Ukrainians are losing their lives, their loved ones, it also has a psychological toll on all of us. Just when we thought COVID pandemic is over, the war broke out. Although we must not forget that the pandemic is not over. And we might just need to learn to live with COVID for a bit longer. Work and life as we know it will never be the same. The notion of hybrid remote work, the gig economy, a truly global talent pool, and many other fundamental challenges and changes to work are at the forefront of discussion in boardrooms. Leaders need to focus on the physical and psychological well-being of their employees and themselves, because you can only take care of others if you first take care of yourself. Dare I say, rise the care-centric leadership. This event will explore some of the ideas on how to engage, inspire, and lead in the new norm. Brought to you by the International Coaching Federation. The International Coaching Federation is a non-profit organization dedicated to professional coaching for over 25 years now. ICF has been called the main accrediting body for both training programs and coaching. How to interact today? Please use the polls, the Q&A, and the networking on the right-hand side through the chat function. Please visit our website after the event, where you find some more invigorating HR leadership and coaching content, and check out our calendar of upcoming events. So we're just, ladies and gentlemen, just waiting for Renee to come on board. So I'll pause for a moment and give a little bit of time for Renee to come and join us. So, ladies and gentlemen, we shall start the event with my business partner Mihai Nodj. Hi, Mihai.
Hi, Tom, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. As unfortunately, uncertainty is a new certainty. But the good news is that Renee Robertson has arrived, so I'm very happy that I don't have to jump in and welcome on stage Renee Robertson to lead this session and start with the interview with the legendary chairman and CEO of WD-40, Garry O'Ridge. So Renee and Garry, please join us here on stage, and the session is now all yours.
Hi, Garry.
Okay, seems unfortunately Renee was here with us, ladies and gentlemen. Some reason she is probably dropped off. But while we're waiting, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce and welcome Garry and have a brief conversation until we bring Renee on stage. So, Garry, it's such a delight and privilege having you here, because if somebody is a good example of exemplary leadership, that's you and how you've built the tribal culture of WD-40. Now, as the saying goes, in life, to be happy, you need only two things. If it moves but shouldn't move, use a duct tape. And if it doesn't move but should move, use a WD-40. Probably everybody's got this can of blue can with a red top, blue tin with a red top, somewhere in a garage, somewhere in a cabinet. So people use it in a household product. But of course, WD-40 is way more than that. So may I just ask you as a brief introduction, tell me about what your company does and what does tribal culture mean to you and into your leadership practices?
Yeah, well, good morning. It's a delight to be with you here from California, which is early morning. And it's always wonderful to be in your presence and to be able to share some of the background. You know, WD-40 Company, we say we're in the memories business. We exist to create positive, lasting memories in everything we do. And that's really the underpinning of our culture. You know, we truly believe culture is a competitive advantage. And we've spent 20 plus years creating a culture where people actually feel like they belong. And I think that's one of the big challenges we have now, going back from one state of work to another. In fact, I was reading some research the other day that I found to be very interesting. I think it was done by Microsoft, and they were talking about the difference between hybrid work and working in the office. And they made a simple statement that really rang in my ears. How do we make the journey back to the office worthwhile? What are we going to do to create a place where people want to go? And I think that's something that should be on top of all of our minds. And it doesn't mean free pizzas and exercise bikes. It means a place where you actually feel like you belong, you're treated with respect and dignity, and you're making a contribution to worthwhile work.
Fantastic. And I've seen Renee here, so I'd like to invite Renee. Please come on the stage with us. It's a delight, privilege having you here. I know you might have some technical difficulty, but hey, this is a live event now. Everybody knows that it's not taped and not recorded, going live. Thank you so much, Renee, for joining. And if you could just start your camera, and I hand it over to you so you can continue the conversation with Garry.
Thank you, Mihai. Hi, Garry. Nice to see you again. How are you?
Good morning. Great.
So sorry, everyone, about that. Apologies, but we're here now, and hopefully my video will load shortly. So I had the pleasure of spending some time with Garry a few weeks back, and we had this fascinating conversation. And I just wanted to share a little something, Garry. I hope you don't mind. Garry started his conversation with me quoting Aristotle from 384 BC. And his quote was this, to put pleasure in the job puts perfection in work. And I was really moved by that statement. And first I thought to myself, am I going to get a history lesson? Or what is Garry going to share? So Garry, why don't you share a little bit about your thoughts and how we began our conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Renee. And thanks for being here. And of course, as Melanie said, this is, live work right now. So we get used to the challenges of virtual. But, Aristotle said, and he was born in 384 BC, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And when you think about that statement, you kind of go, oh, duh. It really makes a lot of sense. All of us who are here today, I'm sure, would agree that we do things in a better way when we enjoy doing them. So what's the role of leadership? It's create a place where people go to work every day. They make a contribution to something bigger than themselves. They feel safe. They learn something new. They're protected and set free by a set of values, which are kind of like boundaries, and they go home happy, because happy people create happy families create happy communities, and happy communities create a happy world. And by gosh, we need a happy world. But unfortunately, most leadership creates this toxic environment. And there's a lot of talk right now, Renee, and I think we might have touched on this, about the Great Resignation. This is not the Great Resignation. This is the Great Escape. Before COVID, people would go to work, and we even know before COVID, the measurement of employee engagement was really low. About a third or less of people go to work every day and they're engaged. So people would go to work and a third would be engaged, enjoying what they do, and the rest were kind of disengaged or even actively disengaged. But they went home or went to their personal life, and that gave them a sense of security and some pleasure. But COVID hit, and suddenly now going home or your personal life doesn't satisfy you either. And people said, something's got to give. And I can't give up my life, but I can give up what I go to every day. And people are now looking for places to go where they're treated with respect and dignity, they're treasured. Everybody who walks into anybody's, business each day, as Bob Chapman from Barry Weinmiller would say, is someone's precious child. Well, I'll add to that. There's someone's precious child, husband, wife, brother, sister, auntie, uncle. And we need to be recognizing that.
Yeah. So what are some of it's a great point about values. And I think it's spot on, because what the pandemic sort of offered all of us was so much time of reflection and to think about what was important to us and what our values were. Can you share a little bit about the values at WD-40 and what that means to your employees and maybe what that looks like, so all of us can have a little experience in that?
Sure. So we have a set of values at the company that are there to protect people and set them free. And they're, funnily enough, hierarchical. So the number one value has more influence over our thinking than the number sixth value. The number one value is we value doing the right thing. The number two value is we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. The number sixth value is we value sustaining the WD-40 economy. Now, as a public company, we are responsible to our stakeholders, and one of our stakeholders is our share owners. And you would think that our number one value would be to create profitability. Well, if we live the other five values that we have every day, the sixth one happens. So when we talk about our values with our tribe members, we say we only have two measurements of our values. You either live them or you visit them. And we don't like a lot of visitors. So we use our values as a basis for decision making. Now, think about our number two value. We value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. If you think about our company, we are in the memories business. So we want to create positive, lasting memories with our shareholders, with our tribe mates, with our communities, with all of our stakeholders. That's a pretty big bar to be able to jump, but it's deliberate. Now, creating positive, lasting memories doesn't mean the prisoners are running the prison. It doesn't mean that we're full of kumbaya and chocolate cake. Leadership is a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted, creating this place of psychological safety, which is really about trust and transparency. And a lot of people think transparency is telling everybody everything. Well, in a world today, you can't do that. But transparency is giving context to everything you do and every decision you make. So again, the values are there to protect us and set us free, and to allow people to make decisions without, being this guy. And I don't know if I introduced you, but this is Al, the soul-sucking CEO, and or the soul-sucking leader. He's the soul-sucking leader of Fear Inc. And one of his bad habits is he loves to micromanage. And the reason he micromanages is because there aren't a set of clear values in the organization that give people power. And the other thing about him, and he's not a coach, and I know coaching is dear to your heart. And let's think about coaching for a minute.
Yeah.
What is a great coach? A great coach does not run on the field. A micromanager runs on the playing field and wants to play the game. A great coach is on the sideline observing the play, spending a lot of time in the locker room with one objective: to help the player play a better game. And I think that's the other side that's so important. At our company, we don't have managers. Everybody is called a coach. So I'm a coach to my direct reports. And my job is to help them identify the play and play the great game.
I love that analogy. And you introduced me to Al. Is there anything else you want to share about Al with our audience? I just found his character.
Well, Al is very undesirable. He has some very unacceptable habits. Firstly, he's a master of control and a know-it-all. Al knows all the answers. He's corporate royalty. Al has climbed his way up this corporate ladder. Thou shalt bow down to Al and pay homage to Al. He thinks learning is for losers because, as far as Al's concerned, he has all the answers. Al's ego eats his empathy instead of his empathy eating his ego. And that's a true killer of corporate culture. He must always be right. And he loves to have a fear-based culture. He thinks micromanagement is essential. He doesn't follow through with his commitments, so he's not reliable. And he hates feedback. Don't give Al any feedback. But on the reverse of that, the servant leader he loves and involves his people. He or she is always in servant leadership mode. They're expected to be competent, so they love to learn. They have a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. They are champions of hope. They think micromanagement, and they know micromanagement isn't scalable. They do what they say they're going to do, and they love feedback. I'm sure there's a lot of folks on our call today who have met Al and have not gone home happy.
That's fantastic. And the chat is blowing up. And for all of our HR friends and colleagues out there, does that sum it up or what? Thank you, Garry, for inventing Al and putting the words and the language to so many experiences that, us in HR have had to manage, and employees around the world have had to manage. So I have a question for you, because we've talked about values, we've talked about the culture. What is, and I think there's a little bit of a formula that you have for culture. I think you referenced a formula. Can you say
Yes.
a little bit about that? I think that's important. That would really resonate for all of us.
Yeah. My learning over time is, and I'll take you back many, many years now to when I was in school in Sydney, Australia, in high school. And I was in my science class, and our science teacher gave us a petri dish. And they said, we are going to grow culture in this petri dish. So here's what you need to pay attention to. You need to pay attention to what you put in the petri dish, and you need to watch it every day, which really inspired my thinking. And then I read some work of Simon Sinek's from his book, The Infinite Game. So I took something he said and I adapted it. And here's my algorithm for culture. Culture equals, parentheses, values plus behavior, close parentheses, times consistency. So what does that mean? So in this petri dish, we put in our values. And what can impact those values? Behavior. So what we need to do as leaders is consistently watch that petri dish to ensure that the behaviors are not turning the culture toxic. And we need to do it day after day. So as leaders, we have to love our people enough to applaud them and reward them for doing great work. But more importantly, we have to be brave enough, if we really love them enough, to redirect behavior that is turning that petri dish into a toxic culture. And we have to do it day after day. So in an organization, ensure you have a compelling set of values. And these are not rules and regulations. Don't get me wrong here. These are statements of freedom that allow people and keep them safe and free. And then leaders have to be brave.
Mm-hmm. Oh, fantastic. I don't know about everyone else, but I have goosebumps when you said that, Garry. Thank you so much. So we're getting a couple of questions here. And I love this question. Thank you, Riva. How do you manage your managers, sort of without being a micromanager? And maybe this starts to lead us into the coaching piece.
Well, number one is we don't have managers, they're coaches. So how do we lead our coaches? Well, our coaches take a pledge, and their pledge is, we're not here to mark your paper, we're here to help you get an A. And that's based on the book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager. And so our commitment to our people is to help people get an A. So what do you need to do? You have to be very clear about what an A looks like. So we spend time in defining what success looks like, and then equipping our people with the freedom to be able to ensure they're observing the play, which means involvement, conversation. When was the last time, someone out there went up to just another colleague and asked the simple question, how are you? What's on your mind? Instead of the running, let's say you have someone in your sales and they've missed their sales target for 3 months in a row. The normal reaction would be someone, why haven't you hit, just what's going on, blah, 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 blah. The coach would go in and say, Renee, I know this is not the outcome you want. What's getting in your way? Is there something happening? How can I help you? What barriers are stopping you from being the person I know you want to be? And around behaviors as well, let me give you a very clear and real example. Our second value in the company is we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. Some time back, I was in a meeting with a group of our leaders, and there was someone in that room that I respect and love who was not creating positive, lasting memories. They were pumping out these toxins. It was a bad, bad, bad day. So what do you do as a coach and a leader? Well, number one, you can interrupt the meeting and kind of reprimand that person. That's not going to work. Number two, you do nothing. That's not going to work. Number three, how can you coach them? So at the end of the meeting, I said to this person, and I'm going to use your name as the example, Renee, but I know it wasn't. I say, hey, Renee, let's go for a walk. So we walked out of our building, and I started looking in a trash can and underneath a tree. And Renee says to me, what the hell are you doing, Garry? I said, Renee, I'm looking for you. The Renee I know and love was not in that room today. Help me understand what's on your mind, what's getting in your way. And we opened up and had a beautiful conversation. Renee had a bad morning. She got up late. She kicked her foot on the bed. She spilled coffee in the car. Someone flicked her off. When she got to the office, the screening system wouldn't work. She couldn't get in the door. But these were all insignificant things that turned her into the Renee we didn't know. So we had this walking coaching session. At the end of it, we hugged and everything was fine. Renee went back in and went to a couple of people and said, hey, sorry, that wasn't me. And everyone says, we know, Renee, that wasn't you. What happened the next day? I observed people going to Renee and saying, Renee, you okay today? Is everything all right? Is there anything we can do for you? That's using your values as a coaching tool to redirect behavior, which was that thing in that algorithm that I shared, that if you didn't redirect it, Renee would have gone out for the rest of the day and probably spread those toxins all around the company without really knowing what she was doing. That's a coaching opportunity.
Yeah. And what's so brilliant about that example too, Garry, is how that scenario created empathy for Renee from others. And that's such an important piece, the component of compassion for leaders. We need to bring that back in, especially after the last few years that we've had. Not that we still don't need to, perform, but we need to have some compassion and empathy for others as well. There's a couple other questions coming in. So here's one. Thank you, Dale. This is a great question. So how do you get your managers to embrace their role as coaches?
Well, you do that by the person that leads them, showing them how much value they add to them by being a great coach. So, this thing kind of is self-sustaining. Are you being the leader today that you wish you were? So again, we talk about this all the time, and it's, again, if you think about our tribal promise, we call ourselves a tribe, not a team. It goes back to this: a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. That's what our promise is to each other in the company. So how do we protect and feed each other? We protect each other by being there, being great coaches, by creating a great business that fuels the economy, a great economy in a company. The beneficiaries are the constituents. So that's important. But This thing is simple. It's not easy, and time is not your friend. That's why the word consistency is so important. You cannot take fairy dust and sprinkle it over a company and say the culture's changed. It doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. And there was a mention in the chat. I noticed that around should time be included in the equation? And I thought that was an interesting observation, because time or consistency is what you're speaking to.
Yeah.
Right. The consistency over time. So
Yeah.
thank you for that comment. I'm scrolling. There's so many comments coming through. This is fantastic. Hey, Jose, thanks for joining us. So here's a question from Jose. So how do you, let me see. How is failure embraced as part of the process?
Okay. We have never, ever, ever made a mistake ever at our company. We don't make mistakes. We have learning moments. So we took the word failure out of our vocabulary and said, we have learning moments. So what is a learning moment? A learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that has to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. So by taking that word failure out, it allows people to be very comfortable about saying, hey, this was what I wanted to do. This is what happened. It didn't work out the way. This is what I learned from it. So, we have a pillar in the company called candor, and it means no lying, no faking, no hiding. I believe most people don't lie. I believe in companies, most people fake and hide. Why do they fake and hide? Because of fear. What are they afraid of? Failure. So if you can take the fear of failure away and replace it with, okay, it's not always going to be right. If I was to introduce myself this morning, I would have said, hi, I'm Garry O'Ridge. I'm the consciously incompetent CEO and chairman of WD-40 Company, who's probably wrong and roughly right in most circumstances. So, that's my kind of mantra. I'm probably wrong and roughly right. And from that, we can learn. So let's take failure out as the fear, and let's replace it with everything we do. Some of it will work, some won't. That's life. But there's learning in everything we do. So embrace the learning moment.
That's fantastic. We have another one coming in. Riva, thank you again. I'm still curious to learn about how the coach-client capacity move into the manager team setting. What can the team do to work better with that kind of manager who does not like feedback?
Go work, go find a new job.
So what if that's okay? So what if you're working for the manager that doesn't want the feedback? What do you do when you find yourself in an environment that doesn't really honor your values?
I think we're seeing that right now, the Great Escape.
Exactly.
There are great companies out there that deserve you as a person. And if where you are is causing you not to go home happy, then you need to do something about it. Because you won't change the person that's impacting you. You can only change yourself.
That's right. That's spot on. As I always like to say, we own our careers, so it's our decisions. And I think we have 1 minute left. And the great question from Rika: do your leaders go through a coach training and receive some type of certification?
Well, internally we have a program called Coaches Coaching Coaches. So because we talk about coaching so much, we have a syllabus within our leadership development program that talks about about coaching and and the elements of coaching. One of the great books on coaching that I love is written by a friend of mine. His name is Michael Bungay Stainer. He wrote the book called The Coaching Habit. We use the principles of the coaching habit. The first two questions in any coach's playbook should be, hi, Renee, what's on your mind? And the second one is, and what else? So that we can help Renee work out, where her challenges are, because we're not going to solve Renee's problems. She's going to solve them herself. Our job as coaches is to identify the opportunities and then find ways of removing barriers to help someone play their best game.
Yeah.
And again, what I'm sharing here, Renee, is this is a quarter of century of work. That's why this consistency and time. We just finished our employee opinion survey for 2022. So we've been doing employee opinion surveys since the year 1999. And our employee engagement at WD-40 Company is 93%. It actually went up over the COVID time. 98% of our people say they love to tell, 98% of our people say they love to tell people they work at our company. And here's one that you'll like. 97% of our employees globally and say they respect their coach. So if that number was not up there, we would know that we're not doing a good job as coaches.
That's fantastic. Garry, I can't thank you enough for spending time with us today and being up so early. I can just see from all the comments, this group is completely inspired. I would let your talent acquisition team make them ready, because I have a feeling your ATS is going to blow up. I think everyone here would love to join your company and get on the journey with you. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And if anybody wants to follow what I do, please follow me on LinkedIn. I post articles there. I write things there. I'd love to interact with folks. And, I'm committed to helping leaders create cultures where people think that the drive to the office is worth it.
Exactly. Fantastic. Thank you, Garry. Have a fabulous day and see you soon.
See ya.
Bye. Okay, everyone. We'll get the details for Garry on there. We'll post them in the chat shortly. So next up, Ricardo, I think you are there. Ricardo is joining us from my friend, from Syngenta, which is an incredible company that has some fantastic values. Again, the values and the work that they're doing is inspiring. And I just happened to meet someone else from the firm yesterday, Ricardo, and said it was the best job they ever had at the most incredible company. And Ricardo is here. He is the group head of change at Syngenta, and he's going to speak to us for a few minutes. And then we'll have some conversation later. So I will see you in a few. I will be back.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. And wow, it was great to hear Garry O'Ridge. I've listened to him before, and it was great to follow him up. Of course, a hard act to follow, and thanks for those kind words, Renee, on Syngenta. But for most folks, we know WD-40, right? I have a can of that blue miracle downstairs somewhere in my house, but Syngenta, maybe not so much. So let me start here by just framing it a little bit with a quick video. So I'll show you this, and then I'll come back and we'll chat a little bit more.
The world is out of balance. We are out of balance. The global population is growing, while at the same time resources are becoming scarce. In the next few decades, we have to overcome unprecedented challenges. Challenges too complex to be addressed by a single nation or organization alone. But what if great minds come together, united in a passion for finding the best solutions of our time? A tribe of visionaries, engineers, scientists, developers, and makers from the finest agricultural companies in the world. From startups, NGOs, universities, think tanks, from our partners and customers. Together, we will form an unparalleled agricultural powerhouse of diversity, collaboration, and innovation. We will deliver breakthrough technology in one field to the next and still to another. We will become the world's central hub of agricultural know-how and offer cutting-edge digital tools for high-precision farming. We will boost the world's agricultural output while increasing the quantity of food, encouraging biodiversity, and elevating the environmental standards of our industry. Together, we will look for opportunities to innovate in every detail of our business, across borders, and beyond. But we will keep coming back to where we have always been, standing side by side with farmers and growers worldwide. Hands-on, building the most local and trusted team in agriculture in our common quest for feeding mankind, creating a greener, healthier, and safer planet. Syngenta Group.
Yeah, so quite a daunting challenge. I see, Lauren, as you comment there, a lot on food sustainability, and we've all felt it, right, in the last couple of years in the pandemic, right, where supply chains were put to a test, right, so let me tell you a little bit about coaching. I want to shift it over to discussion, and what I want to share is a little bit about kind of our journey, what we're doing in this world of coaching, and then of course we're going to have a discussion a little bit later. So I'll kind of pace through this. Where does it fit? Again, as Renee was saying, I had change in org development, and we have a development team really focusing on quite a lot of things. And you'll probably look at some of these, and I'm sure they're familiar to most of you, right? Some of the aspects that you'll see in most org development areas of the HR function. Now, where does coaching fit in, right? Is that something that aligns or goes in? And we've been thinking about this quite a bit. And we went about, looking outside and looking at some of the statistics. Now, this, Lumese did a survey. It's a bit dated now, but I would argue the numbers are probably tilting in the wrong direction here, right? But looking at this, unbelievable about the complexity that people are feeling, right? And I've heard another statistic: 70% of leaders are unable to cope with the growing complexity of their jobs, right? But here, we're seeing over half just can't cope with this complexity, right? 60% of organizations, folks in organizations saying, well, I'm not sure, our organization can manage that complexity. And almost half of C-level respondents, right? Now that's a huge amount of lack of confidence in the complexity that we're dealing with our company. And you just saw the video, trying to shift agriculture to feed a growing population in the coming years, that's also dealing with the climate crisis, is a daunting task, right? So there's a lot of complexity, and how do we meet it? Well, for us, again, I'm laughing. I had in the upper left here, you see exit, right? It was one of the many things we've been struck with, but now I might change that to escape after listening to Garry. But we've gone through a tremendous amount of change, from systems, strategy changes. Obviously, COVID, we've both, all of us have seen that in the last couple of years, and are continuing to deal with it. Supply chain shortages because of it. We have an IPO looming ahead as we get excited about that. And then internally, performance management has changed. I'll touch on that a little bit. And then org structures are, C-suite levels have changed, ownership for us. So we've gone through an unprecedented amount of change at Syngenta, right? So, okay, so we saw there's this complexity out there in the world that people are struggling to meet with, and lack the confidence that they or their executives or their leaders or their organizations can cope with. We saw that we have as much, if not more, of that change and that change agenda at Syngenta. So let's look at our coaching capability. So there's three things here I looked at. First, internal. What does it look like for us inside? And it was scattered at best. So you have some pockets of internal coaches who were working with their particular clients in some parts of the world, but it really was scattered. There wasn't a centralized community of practitioners in this space. So what about external? Well, we certainly were. I could have used the same word, but I chose this because I'm saying, well, missing the mark in some cases, right? For two reasons: either not quite the right coach mix, or not scalable. And that's that second piece, right? I mean, so, we can certainly get, and you see a lot of coaches in very senior roles, or for a privileged few, I would say. And we struggled with the same thing, right? How do you really open this up? Should we open it up, right? That's one of the questions we were looking at. And then the manager piece. And, Gary spoke about this too. As a matter of fact, when he was at WD-40, and I'd heard him say this earlier, they have to shifted the language, right, from managers to coaches. Now, while we haven't gone to that extent, we certainly are nurturing this role of coaching as one of the primary capabilities of a manager, right? Because there are other administrative aspects, and one could argue philosophically one way or another, but there's no doubt that the coaching is an aspect of management, and this is something that we're now increasingly exploring. So, like anyone else, we looked outside. So we said, okay, well, what's going on out here in this space. Let's do some benchmarking. Again, I'm guessing for many of you, this won't be new, right? We're democratizing, as I said before. It's not just for the privileged few, right? It's access. Everyone's struggling with this complexity, and therefore everyone needs to develop themselves in multiple ways, and coaching is certainly one of them. The leadership development, well-being, mental health, you see in leadership development programs or in DEI programs, right? Some of these talent programs. We bring in coach capabilities and build some of them within that, and bring in coaches to some of these aspects. And we've heard that strongly from the outside, as well as the importance of that link to cultural transformations. And again, Gary, I keep referencing that. It was such a good talk. He spoke of this. Service providers, right? We're trying to, when I show this external missing the target sometimes, we've seen it out there too, right? Are we actually having this visibility of who's out there? And are we trending and taking the insights from the data? I mentioned part of our OD portfolio is people insights and analytics, right? So how are we actually looking at this? And externally, this has been an issue as well. And then, the last one, again, this really resonated with us, and I'm sure it will with you, in the flow of work, right? This isn't something you kind of go off and do and then come back and try to remind yourself, what happened, right? This is something that is contextual to your day to day. We have all the use cases that, again, might be familiar. So, we looked outside, we said, okay, this is something we really need to lean in on. And what do we do? Right. And we have these use cases, whether it's, transforming and bringing in digital or agile ways of working, the cultural aspect, absolutely important to have cultural champions really leading from the front, talent and talent programs and development, new leaders as they're coming in from other organizations or coming new into the workforce and transitioning into multiple roles. The inclusion agenda, right, as it's linked to diversity and equity, such an important aspect that coaching absolutely helps. So where we went, and this is the focus here, is virtual on-demand coaching. Now, this is something fairly new we're exploring, and we really thought through these the why, the what, and the who, right? And you can see it here. Why? Again, democratizing, right? Everyone is dealing with the same complexity. Everyone should have access to have those discussions that really start driving some of those aspects of you see their growth mindset, right? That you really can meet that complexity with the complexity in mind. You say, when you see complexity in something else, you can either change the complexity in it, or you change the complexity in your mind as how you're able to deal with it. And we certainly can't change the complexity of the world anytime soon. So, this is an important aspect. And the change, you've seen the change, unprecedented, as I keep using the word, but it truly is, and it has been for us. And you then lean into the what. How do we really get to this aspect of virtual? Now, virtual, one of those assumptions for people is, well, you have to be in the office, right? You can't work remotely. We all laugh at that, but for many, many people, this lesson was hard learned only in the last couple of years, right? Where these assumptions and beliefs of not being able to work externally have changed, right? They've been turned on their heads for necessity, right? And now we're seeing, well, why can't we use and leverage some of these technologies in different ways to distribute our support, in this case, in coaching? And really have some kind of a matching system, right? So back to the other scattered piece, we know how people are consuming it. We know how we're matching up, and we can really, as I saw everyone check in at the beginning of our talk here, you're people from all over joining us today, right? So a distributed workforce, like I'm sure in most of your companies, how do we ensure that we do this? And again, to the who, to really open it up for employees across all levels. So, how's it going? The current feedback, I use the word happy, and I'm conscious of this word sometimes being overused, right? And if you remember way back when, and Gary was talking about employee engagement, we used to track satisfaction, right? Then we shifted the wording to engagement. That's what we care about. We track engagement and commitment, right? This is an important aspect. But from the aspect of happiness, how happy are you with the program that you're driving? And the coaching itself, you really getting some value from the coaching, and would you continue, right? So we got some very positive numbers coming out of this experiment, right? Which is how you start to look at these things, right? And I think it's an important one to start with the steps of really checking in with the population, so we're really leaning into employee listening as an aspect of our broader conversation. And when it comes to coaching, you don't have access to the individual, and nor should you, the individual coaching discussions, and you're not following up. But on aggregate, it's really important to say, are you kind of hitting the mark? Do you need to shift or evolve the offering? And that's where we are right now with it. So, I want to, close in summary, just a couple of points. And, and again, it's a brief talk. And as Renee said, we'll come back and we'll unpack a little bit of this and have a discussion. But, there's a need, right? There's no doubt about that. And there's a need for coaching and the complexity I talked quite a bit about. And we need to increase the access. It shouldn't be for the few privileged. It shouldn't be for those who are only in and around those major office hubs. It should really be distributed across the organization, continuously evolving. And one thing on evolving, right? I mean, I showed you the feedback. Of course, we're gathering a lot more feedback than what you saw here on these happy sheets. And the aspect is, we really want to see what adoption and outcomes look like. We tend to, and I'm sure you're all familiar maybe with the term vanity metrics, right? We look at the metrics that make us feel good. How much stuff we did. So yeah, we deployed all these coaches, and all these people are getting coached, and we take that as a performance metric, but it's really not, right? That's maybe an activity metric, or perhaps a compliance one. The next one is adoption, right? Are people actually adopting? Is there a return to these coaches? Are they having those ongoing discussions in the flow of the work? And then outcome. Is it making a difference? Are we actually having an impact? And we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, in our discussion. Are we having an impact with the work we're doing here, specifically if you look at teams or individuals that are coached versus non, right? So we're starting to look at that. And again, measure it, go back to point 2, right? So this is that continual loop of, you're always going to get in the fringes, well, I got the wrong coach, this technology piece didn't work for me. But on the whole, you need to really look, through the noise, and find the signals that are really driving the impact in the organization across, in this case, this coaching program, and then evolve based on that. And like everything else or quite a lot of what we do, think about culture. Gary spoke about culture a lot. He said it was, 2.5 decades in the making. Takes time, right? It takes time to inculcate a culture and a set of behaviors in an organization, but you can't just let it go on its own. You really got to track it, and I think you have to continue to pulse some data, and then make evolve it and make changes as you will. So that's basically what we've been doing and what we've been up to for the recent past, I would say. And with that, I'm gonna pause here, and I know we have some other discussions coming up as Renee rejoins us. But again, happy to, of course, take questions as the conversation goes on, and as Gary did, please feel free to reach out to me in LinkedIn, and always love to broaden the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ricardo. Great points. I know lots of commentary. Everyone loves the video. Who's not inspired by that video? And your slides were fantastic. And of course, the content was spot on. So really looking forward to, furthering the conversation when we come back together and on the panel and unpack this a little bit more. And so we'll see you in a few minutes.
That sounds great. Thanks, Renee.
And here's Dan. Hi, Dan.
Hi, how are you?
Can you hear us okay, Dan?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can't hear you. Maybe button again.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Dan.
Perfect.
Perfect. I can hear you. Lovely.
So welcome, Dan. Dan joins us from Banco Santander, and he is group head of culture and strategy there, but also a culture evangelist. And I know that is such a hot topic for us these days about culture and coaching's role in it. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's hear from Dan, and then we'll regroup and talk more with Dan and Ricardo. Thanks,
Renee.
Dan.
Well, it's true. Indeed, I am a culture proponent, a person that loves culture. I really, really think culture has its place in the work environment. And everything we do at Santander, and my role is about how do we improve the culture? How do we foster a really good culture for our colleagues? And, we're 200,000 people across the globe, and we really try to live our three values of simple, personal, and fair every day. And I was thinking, what can I share with you today, and what can I speak about? And I know the topic is very much around leadership and also coaching. And I was thinking, okay, so how can how can leadership play such a big role in culture? And I think it's probably one of the founding blocks of having a great culture. And I think the main role of leaders is to create a really strong environment, a great environment where good work can be done, where people can bring themselves to the office environment, to the business, and do the best they possibly can. They can have the careers that they want to do. They can help the customers in the way they want to help. So how is it that leaders would create such a good environment? And, I think some of the best leaders are perhaps akin to the best conductors, the best music conductors in the world. A conductor's job is the same as a leader's job. The idea is that they have to create an environment for the orchestra to thrive, for the orchestra to play their best music. And that's what we have to do in the workplace. So I've got three things really that are on my mind for what a great leader does when it comes to creating the best environment and a great culture. And I think the first thing that great leaders do is they empower their people. They empower their people and get out of the way. And you probably know the Harvard Business School professor Francesca Gino wrote a book in 2018 called Rebel Talent. And in this book, she looks at the fact that leaders have to empower their people, move out of the way. And it's one of the things that helps people have a nice work environment. When leaders are not micromanaging, when leaders trust their people to do the work, when leaders empower and say, you can go and, this is the result I want, or the outcome that we need as a business, go and find the route, find the way to do that. So the first thing that was on my mind is, okay, if we create a good environment, that means empowerment. The second thing that I think leaders can do to really create a good environment is have large chunks and huge swathes of empathy. And empathy, of course, is the ability to understand and to share the feelings of one another or another person. And if you understand and share the feelings of another person, I think as a leader, that really sets you apart. And a fantastic example of someone with huge amounts of empathy was Arne Sorensen, who you may know used to be the CEO of Marriott. Unfortunately, he passed away with pancreatic cancer last year. But before he passed away, he actually led Marriott as the hotel group through the coronavirus challenge. And at the start of the coronavirus challenge, as Marriott was beginning to close hotels around the globe, he recorded a very short 5 minutes video, which you can go onto YouTube and have a look at now. And I encourage you to do that after the session. And Arne stood there with a very cheap backdrop in the background. This video was something that the Marriott communications team had made with him, perhaps on a mobile phone camera. He starts the video by apologizing and actually makes a joke and says, "I'm really sorry that I'm standing here today in front of you with no hair." And actually he had no hair because he was undergoing treatment for his pancreatic cancer. So he showed straight away that he was a person, an individual, a leader that you could trust in. And during the course of this 5-minute video, he explains that coronavirus is having a massive impact on the business. He doesn't sugarcoat the situation. He says this is a really, really bad situation for the Marriott hotel groups. And he sends sympathy to all of the workers and people affected by the coronavirus, the spread of the virus. He immediately says, I don't have all of the answers. As he goes through the video, you can see that he's very emotional. He's nearly brought to tears at one point in the video. He makes mistakes. His speech isn't perfect. They didn't do any retakes with the video. This was a one-take video, and they kept in those kind of bloopers or imperfections, which I think made him very, very authentic. And he really displayed his empathy, because he immediately said, my executive team is taking a 50% pay cut, and I myself am taking a 100% pay cut straight off the bat. And I think, he really showed his empathy, because he understood that people were going through a very hard time. He understood that they had very strong feelings of nervousness and risk and so on and so forth. And he wanted to be a part of that. He wanted to join the people of Marriott and lead from the front. So I think the empathy that he showed was really good. So we're creating a good environment. We have leaders that are empowering people. We have leaders that are having empathy. And then I think the third and final building block thing I want to share with you now is around leading by example. I think that leaders absolutely do need to lead by example. And one good example of this perhaps is a leader that really lived one of their core values, and that is Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. You may know that Amazon has a number of core values, and one of them is frugality. The idea behind frugality as a core value was that Amazon wanted, and Jeff himself wanted, the company to focus on the customer. So the purpose of his company was never about making money, but it was about giving customers a great experience. And with that in mind, being frugal in everything they did and not spending money where it wasn't needed was very, very key and very, very important to their success. And actually in 1995, when Amazon was starting to grow and begin its growth trajectory, Jeff and some of his team went down to the local hardware store in the US where they were located, and they were looking for some new office desks to put into their office. And actually, going around this store, they found that the desks were pretty expensive. And they found that if they bought a door frame, and attached some wooden legs to it, that could function as a desk, and it would be a whole lot cheaper. So Jeff Bezos himself, he wasn't a carpenter. Apparently he didn't do a very good job at this, but he affixed some wooden legs to the door that he'd just bought and used it as his desk. He worked from this rickety, unstable door as a desk. And I think that, this also serves now as a law about the culture within Amazon, that, frugality is a very important cultural value and a core value, but it also serves as a reminder about creativity, which was another value within Amazon. So I think that was, very, very good. And, if we have an environment where we have empowerment, if we have an environment where we have large doses of empathy and also leaders who do lead by example, then I think we're well on the way to having an environment where people can thrive in the workplace. And, in closing, the final thing I want to share with you is, when I think about leadership, they being the leaders do also need to be coaches in what they do. And, people and leaders and managers and people who have direct reports, they don't necessarily need the skills of a professionally trained coach, but they do need to be able to listen and to advise without judgment on certain topics. And I think they need to be able to coach people and give them a chance to learn and grow and experiment. So perhaps the fourth pillar is having a great environment is fine, but you also need psychological safety. So you also need to not have a fear of failure. And actually, there's some great examples of companies that really promote psychological safety within their environment. And I've got two examples to share with you. Ben & Jerry's, the ice cream manufacturer. I suppose you've all eaten Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Well, they have in Vermont, in the US, in their headquarters, they have what they call the flavor graveyard. And this is a physical graveyard with tombstones, headstones, whatever you want to call it. And they put the names of flavors of ice creams which have failed on those tombstones. They retire that flavor from the product catalog, never to be sold again. And they live and they serve there within this graveyard as a visual reminder that it's okay that things go wrong, that it's okay to try things. There's nothing to be scared of when it comes to failure. And actually, the second example is very interesting because we've all heard from Garry just now, but he didn't tell you one thing, one very important thing about WD-40. And actually, I have a book coming out in August. It's going to be published in August on cultures of innovation. And it explains how to create innovative cultures within the workplace. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'll give away a book or a few books to anyone who's a new follower today. So please do that and keep in touch. But Garry actually helped me with writing the book. And he explained to me that WD-40 is called WD-40 for a reason. Water displacement, which is the technology and the methodology behind their lubricant, is the WD. But the 40 is actually as a result of them taking 40 attempts to create their product. Had they stopped on number 28, I probably would have never spoken to him. Had they stopped on attempt number 31, we would have not heard from him today, I suspect. But they stopped on attempt number 40 when they had a successful product. So that psychological safety, that lack of the fear of failure, I think is a wonderful thing and a great way to create these environments where people can really thrive. So I just wanted to share those few things with you about what are the conditions that people need to create when it comes to leadership, or what should leaders be doing to create a great environment. And I hope there's some interesting stories and helpful tips for you. So Renee, I pass back to you now.
Okay, fantastic. Welcome. All right, I think I'm back. Can everyone hear me okay? Someone can
You're back.
Perfect. Thank you. I think Garry knew about my morning this morning, how I stubbed my toe and was running late. And so thanks for your patience, and let's further the conversation. So Dan, great, just some really great points. And I think, do we want to invite Ricardo back in at this time? Is he available? Perfect. There you are.
I'm glad I joined before Dan said no, so I just snuck right in there.
This is fantastic. I am so energized, I'm sure, and I know our whole audience is energized as well, about just both your presentations, Garry's presentation. This is what we as HR and change leaders are so inspired by, the work that we do, right? So let's just jump in. So, boy, I don't even know where to start. Dan, let's go back to your point. What do you see as sort of the top one or two conditions in the environment that really help facilitate or act as a catalyst towards having these cultures that we've been really talking about today?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that I didn't mention is I think leaders need to be very visible in the organization. And what I mean by this is they do lead by example, and they show you the way forwards. And this also plays to coaching as well. So you may know the story of a lady called Sally Ride. She's a super inspiring woman. She was the first American woman in space in 1983. And, since she went into space, there's been 49 females from the US also join her in space or on future space trips. And she was 32 years old when she undertook this mission with NASA. So super young, first female. She went on a second trip 2 years later in 85, I think. And she, her job there was to go up into space and recover satellites using some, remote recovery techniques. So really, really fascinating. And she came back to Earth and she was super uncomfortable. She suddenly had huge amounts of fame and attention around her. And she was very nervous and she shied away from the fame and the attention. But as her career went on, she realized that you can't be what you can't see. And she became famous for this phrase, you can't be what you can't see. And she started writing children's books, making TV appearances, doing musical songs. And she actually had, I think it was 2 schools named after her in the United States. So that was really interesting for me to reflect upon, which was, she had a role to play here, and it was promoting her career and promoting visibility and saying to women around the world, you can do this. And I think leaders have to do that in their environments as well. And the second example of this also is probably many of you on the call have heard of Leicester, which is a place in the UK. They have a football team, Leicester Football Club, and they're somewhat famous because in 2016, they won the Premier League, which is the English top division, and they broke the monopoly of the Manchester and Chelsea and London clubs winning this competition. They were actually 5,000 to 1 odds chances to win, which is basically 0% chance. So they did the unheard of. And actually last year they launched a £100 million football campus where their players go to train every day. And this campus was very interesting because there were 21 full-sized football pitches on this campus. And it got me thinking, why does a professional sports team, which has a squad of 25 players, need 21 pitches? That's basically a pitch per player. And actually, what I found was I scratched the surface and I asked them, why do you have this? Why do you have so many pitches? Why do you have a £100 million complex? And they said, no, this is not just for the first team. This is for all of our talent, regardless of age or ability. All of our teams use these facilities. And this is really important to them because they have junior squads of 8-year-old, 7-year-old children who are now within touching distance and close proximity of the first team, by the way, the champions of England, and they can see the path that they have to take in order to make it as a professional sports person. So those 2 examples are just small anecdotes, but I really think that visibility of leadership is critical.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that perspective. And it really ties into the theme that has been mentioned throughout, right? It's sort of modeling the behavior that you want others to have and creating that environment, that community where employees feel safe and supported and also willing to take some risks, right? So thank you for sharing that. Ricardo, I'm going to switch over to you. You brought up such a timely piece around democratization of coaching. That's really getting a lot of play out in our communities. And there was even a question about what type of platforms are Syngenta using. Can you share a little bit about what's that been like to look at look at those platforms, determine how to incorporate them into sort of this coaching mindset, this behavior change?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things you said there, and Dan, I loved what you were, some of the stories you were sharing. They certainly resonated. I mean, we're talking about culture as the kind of red thread that goes throughout this, and I've borrowed a definition, Dan. I'm sure you have your own for sure, and interested in reading more about it in your upcoming book. And there's a plug, and I think the one we look at is the patterns of behaviors that we encourage, discourage, or tolerate in people and systems over time. That's how we define it. I've borrowed that from Carolyn Taylor, who wrote her book Walking the Talk, and it's patterns of behaviors, right? So when we're looking at, what's happening, or we're integrating something new like this, digital distributed coaching support and platform, we see, well, what's the current behavioral landscape, right? Well, what's actually happening? What are these patterns that we see? And then we can track how they're changing, right? And the key is patterns, right? I think we over-index on the loud people in the room often, but we really need to go a little bit more deeply into what we're seeing across, again, as the definition says, people and systems. So in people, it's really around, if we think about the language we use in how we integrate it or highlight it in leader or manager development. How does that come into the organization through learning, right? And the learning platforms that we drive. And in systems, things like performance management, we're all familiar with that. And I think we've all learned that let's have one chat in the middle of the year and then we won't talk till the end of the year, is not working, right? So everyone's kind of getting a little more agile about that. We've done the same, right? We call pause to talk, right? So we have a pause anytime during the day or week with the people that we work with and for, and we have these discussions, right? So we're looking at those patterns. What was it like before? And then we experiment, right? One of the things we talked about, agility is certainly in everyone's lips and has been in the last couple of years when it was introduced more and more to organizations outside of IT. And and in this aspect of agility, and we were starting to integrate some of these things in the past where you'd run a pilot and no matter what happens, you scale, right? Now with this, and to your question, how do we bring this in? It was really about experimenting, right? Let's try something out, knowing that it might not work, right? As Ben Franklin famously said, I've found 999 ways to not make a light bulb, right? So in this case, we brought in some different options and we said, let's test them out in populations. Let's see what the feedback is. Let's see what works. And don't get too enamored by the bells and whistles of solutions that promise great things or things that you don't need, right? Really get to the crux of what is the problem we're trying to solve. And this is another one, right? We fall in love with solutions, right? And we should be falling in love with the problems. And that's what we did. We really looked at what are we after? How do we experiment? And then when we see something that's working, let's do more of that and less of that, right? It is as simple as that in spite of its complexity. And that's, I think, how we went down the path. And to be very open, it's early days. We're still on the path and we're going to continue to look at the data, to speak to our colleagues across the world and see how it's working out, and and change and tweak along the way as makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Ricardo. And just a sort of a follow-up question. When you mentioned the flow of work in your presentation, right? And we know that process drives behavior. It can drive behavior in our systems. How have you, or maybe you can highlight some ways that you have integrated sort of coaching into a process at Syngenta? And you can even, if you need a few minutes, you can reflect on that, or you can jump right in.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in with the example actually I already gave and just maybe double click on it, which is this whole pause to talk, right? When we
Yeah.
introduced this, right, we said, okay, what is this? Here's a thin structure. Let's not get overly complicated, but it was in replacement of what was the annual performance management piece, right? Now, when we brought that in, the key aspect that we drove into that was, again, I'm stealing the wording from Garry here, but it was really managers as coaches, right? Now, I think one of the worst things we do in HR, and I've been guilty of this myself, is we integrate and use synonymously managers and leaders, right? And we need to probably move away from that. But managers as coaches, I think, is an easier link. And in the Parse Talks, we really integrated the learning around not only the process of what does it look like to have this ongoing discussion, right? And we framed it around a couple of conversations that you should be having about performance, around development. And we integrated it with the role of the manager in this situation as a coach. And of course, part of that coaching includes learning, right? Because we don't you don't automatically get get a coaching certificate when you get your first management job. All of a sudden, you find yourself as a manager, a people manager, and increasingly you're dealing with multiple aspects of complexity. And one of them is, how do I help these people? And the coaching capability is certainly one that's helped. So I think that's one place where we've absolutely integrated or are starting to integrate as much as we can the mindset of coaching within one of the pivotal HR processes of the year.
Yeah. And I'm curious, and this question is for both of you. What are some of the approaches you use for training your managers and your leaders to coach?
I think if I take this just to build on what Ricardo said, we have a similar kind of philosophy within the bank. And I think one of the interesting touch points we have is we have a continuous listening mechanism. So we're always asking our colleagues, how are they doing? How do they feel about the culture? How is remote working for them? Whatever the hot topic is. So we're doing this on a continuous process. We're not asking everybody to fill a survey every day. We're asking a group, a subset of people every quarter to fill a survey. Maybe they fill in 4 times a year. And we really have our finger on the pulse because of this. And we're using AI technology in the background to push tips to the managers to help them improve. And, this is a virtual coaching kind of relationship here. So if we see that they are perhaps struggling on, how to make remote working work or how to hold meetings and give feedback, then we can give them some coaching and some guidance in that way. So I think that's good. And then the second thing, very similar to Ricardo on this, is we're trying to promote this culture of really regular feedback. So, most of our workers are knowledge workers. And many of us on the call today are knowledge workers. We need help. We can't do everything alone. We don't expect that everybody can do everything alone. We need help for our skills, for our abilities, for our personality and behaviors. And we look to coaches or managers or leaders not to do things for us, but to help us, enable us to do those things. And having regular feedback, not being scared or fearing feedback is very important to us as well. So we have a level of honesty, and we know that the feedback comes from a position of we care about you, rather than we want to be better than you, or I want to step on another colleague. It's always from a position of this will help you, which helps us.
That's fantastic. Yeah, go ahead, Ricardo.
No, that's very nice, Dan. That certainly resonates with some of the stuff we've looked at, and and I think there's 2 things. I mentioned the flow of work. Well, one, there are actual, I'll call them hard skills within the coaching broader capability that are helpful, right? And Renee, you know this better than most, right? Given your role, of course, and who you work for, but the aspects of listening, right? One of those simple ones that again, incredibly easy to think about, but how many of us really get into that mode of, well, I'm not listening, I'm just waiting, right? I'm waiting for you to finish so I can speak. And how do we really truly help in the coaching process for our managers to withhold judgment and deeply listen with that care of understanding and compassion as you used before. And some of these are, skills that you can at least maybe if not learn until you practice, and certainly understand, right? So there is that aspect of understanding, and of course, all the multimedia aspects of that. And then how do you integrate it into the flow of work? Similar to what Dan was saying, there's, a lot of AI driven and, the advent of nudging engines, right? Of reminding people within the workflow or the daily connections they have with their teams and with other stakeholders to stop and reflect and think about, are they coaching, right? It's almost like, we mentioned some great coaches in the discussion before, Bungay Stainer, for example, and the advice monster he talks about, right? We just, as soon as someone says something to you as a manager, you want to give advice, fix the problem, right? And we've learned that that's not the way. The coach is to listen, right? I mean, I learned this from my wife, right? She would come to me and say something, and I'm like, "Oh, here's the answer," and she's like, "I didn't ask for your advice, I just wanted you to hear me out, right?" And she's like, "I know the answer. I'll get to it. I just wanted you to lend me your ear." And sometimes it's as simple as that. So I think it's both. It's there is some level of I'll use the outdated term of classroom training, but it's not classroom training anymore. But it is the aspects of learning some of these skills and then applying them on the flow of work and getting help while you do just that, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's great point about the listening piece. So for so long we say that's a soft skill. It's really a hard skill. Especially as a manager, as a leader, as an employee, as whatever role you're in, husband, wife, brother, sister, right? To be present, to listen when you also know you have the pressure of what's around you to deliver results, to perform, to solve problems. It's that ability to be that agile and adapt moment to moment, right? As leaders, and be able to switch your gears. Which this is life's work, and we're all on the journey together, which is fantastic. So I have a question. A question came in from in the chat, which I think is a fabulous question. And this is for both of you. What does authentic leadership look like when in times like this of constant uncertainty is the new certainty? So we know it's just the constant unknown, right? And change. What does it look like?
Do you want me to go first on this one?
Yeah, Dan, jump in.
I think I think the best thing a leader can do here is, in order to be authentic, is say I don't know or I don't have the answers. So not try to impress the whole organization and say I know everything, I have all of the answers, and here are the solutions. And I think it's historically or traditionally perhaps that's been the natural behavior of many leaders. But actually, through coaching and through the the advancements in our culture that we've made in previous years across the globe, I think people have become more willing to say, "I don't know and I need help." And it's actually interesting. One of the most fun times I have, and I think the most fun we have in the organization here at the bank, is when we do crowdsourcing together. So we have our leaders say, "We don't have the answer to this problem. What do you think we should do?" And the fact that we can all work together on a shared challenge and try to build something even better together is really, really important. Very empowering for our people. Very good for the leaders who suddenly learn, another opinion, an external view, which is, as I say, very much aligned to coaching. Why do you have a coach? Well, some of the benefits are because they give you, an ear. They give you a picture of reality that you might not have seen before. They give you an external view or another opinion. And you can do the same with crowdsourcing. So I love it when, in times of uncertainty, leaders say, I don't have the answers, and we need to see or work on it together.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, not knowing and sharing that is such an important thing. Then I for me, I think that again that all resonates. One of the things is we're pretty good in general as humans in knowing when someone's being realistic or being authentic or not, right? We have this BS detector, and I'll let you Google that because this is a family show. But I think when someone's up there, they're talking, and we've all been with people that all of a sudden the mic turns off or they're in another discussion and they just somebody else appears, and you think, well, hold on, these things are not consistent, right? And we're very, very good at detecting that. And I think only very few people can really show an empathic persona when they really don't feel that way. So knowing that, I think, is helpful for leaders because you're not fooling anyone, right? So it's important to really act in accordance to your values, and I think that's the second thing. It's really acting in accordance to your values, and I think we've mishandled a lot of the terminology. I think Garry talked well about the aspects of vulnerability and transparency, right? It doesn't mean I'm going to come and share with you every issue I've ever had in the last week, right, and cry on your shoulder. right? There's still an aspect and a role of leadership here that's required in order to move forward. But, you know, the truth is, you know, and you saw the statistics I might have shared on the slide, you know, we're not meeting the complexity with our own knowledge. It has to be broader than us, you know, like Dan example of the crowdsourcing aspect, right? We is definitely smarter than I. And, you know, how do you really tap into that? And authenticity is when you're saying the things that everyone knows to be true, right? Just like culture, it's the water in which you swim, right? And you don't always see it around you, but you kind of know when you feel it. And everyone knows when someone is saying that. And when someone says, you know, I don't know, you know, we all know they don't know, but it's comforting to hear it, and all of a sudden it starts building that trust and authenticity and you know, psychological safety, as you shared earlier, to really lean in and kind of embrace the unknown and the complexity together. So for me, that's a little bit of what it starts to sound like, I suppose.
Yeah. Wow. You know, and we're just about coming up on time, and I think the audience and myself, we could spend hours in this conversation, because we're at such a pivotal point right now in just the journey of humankind, of the world, of everything we've been through, and we've all been through it together. In a way, we're all having a similar experience. We're all looking back to our values and what's important. Organizations are starting to recognize, not that they haven't, but truly embrace the values and realizing the power of the full potential of, you know, their workforce, you know, and their communities, their customers, and really bringing it all together. And Dan, I echo the piece on crowdsourcing, and I commend both of you, because the listening that both your organizations is doing is so critical. It you know, it really feeds so many strategies for the business. And I always say, meet people where they are, and support them in where they want to go. And that's in essence what you're doing. You're meeting your people, you're meeting your organizations, and you're providing them sort of the path to help them personally, professionally, the organization as a whole, to thrive. So I can't thank both of you enough for being here today. Just brilliant. I look forward to future conversations. I know the audience is just dying to connect with each of you and Garry. So both of you should check your ATSs, because they may blow up today also, but you're tremendous leaders doing tremendous work. And I think we all would love to continue to be on a journey with you. So thank you for that. Thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you so much for being with us, for staying in there. What an incredible conversations today to hear from Garry and Ricardo and Dan. Three very different types of organizations doing different work, but yet recognizing the importance of value, behavior, coaching, culture, and how together, you know, we really are empowered to change the world. So again, thank you. Thank you from ICF. Thank you for HR Congress for having us all. For all of you, be well, stay healthy, and let's continue the conversation. Thank you. Namaste.
Great stuff. Thank you, everyone. Have a great one.
Have a great one.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Ricardo, Dan, and Garry. Awesome session.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Thomas.
And really thank you for the continuous support of the International Coaching Federation. This session couldn't have happened without the support. And leadership in coaching is going to be a pivotal part of success in these challenging times, ladies and gentlemen. You can reach the recording soon on our website to watch the sessions on demand. The next edition of the HR Congress Forum series is on the 7th of April, Talent at Work. Please visit the website for details. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your morning, day, or evening, and see you next time.